Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Crossover U podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye and I'm joined with Josh today, and we're bringing you a poll overview, and we're just going to talk about the current state of college basketball right now. A lot of things going on, a lot of movement in the poll the past few weeks, and we're definitely going to touch on that. We're going to talk about some of our conference picks as conference play starts to begin. I know for a few teams it's already started. Some teams haven't played their first conference game yet. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about some updated freshman of the year watch rankings. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the mid majors and some of the teams and players that have kind of caught our attention so far this year. And then we'll give you an updated Final Four pick and our updated Final Four picks and see kind of how they stack up compared to our previews going into the season. So let's get started with the AP poll. I'll turn it to you. What jumps out at you most right now?
Honestly, my big push is really seeing this Auburn and Tennessee mixture. Obviously, if you looked at last week, Auburn and Tennessee had like a really close first round vote. Tennessee ended up winning it. This week, it was slightly more in favor of Tennessee, but if I'm not wrong, Auburn still got a few good votes for first place, and which is very fair. And this is a great argument on whether Auburn is really number one team or Tennessee's number one team. Personally, at the moment, I'm kind of in the mix because Tennessee had a great win against Illinois, but it was also on a buzzer beater. Auburn does
Right.
have one loss, but it's Duke in Duke. So, where do you really put that?
Yeah. I mean, I think Auburn's loss to Duke wasn't a bad loss. I mean, that's at Cameron Indoor, and they still played really competitive in that game. So again, not a bad loss in my opinion. I think Auburn, I talked about how I thought Gonzaga was to me still the best team in the country in terms of how I thought they looked. In our last episode we did together. That take was pretty bad, I won't lie. I'll admit. They did not back me up on that at all. I was not expecting them to drop that game to UConn. I understand that was at Madison Square Garden, Stores South, as Husky fans like to call it. But yeah, Gonzaga has some problems they need to address, specifically with the play of Graham Ike. He needs to be a little bit more consistent. They're a little bit too reliant on Ryan Nemhard, so I think I'm a little bit out. I am out on Gonzaga looking like the best team. I'm shifting over to you with how you were saying Auburn is. I don't see a true competitor to Auburn for that current title right now. Tennessee has looked really good, but like you mentioned, um, that was a good Illinois team they played, and them
Honestly,
winning
Illinois,
at the
yeah,
buzzer.
probably
But
the second best team in the Big Ten too. So
yeah,
really
for
give them
sure.
his props.
But I mean, yeah, I have to give Tennessee credit. I think this team is all around potentially going to end up being a better team. I don't know record wise, but in terms of players they have than on the roster this year, I think they don't have to be relying on one guy, kind of how they were last year with Dalton Connect. I mean, Chaz Lanier has really emerged as a big time scorer, big time shooter, and Zakai Ziegler's improvements on the offensive side of the game has been really cool to see. And you already know what he brings on the defensive side of the ball. And I mean, I think that team's built to definitely compete for an SEC championship. I do think Auburn wins the SEC, but yeah, I mean, other than that, um, Kentucky definitely. I know I had my take going into the season that I thought Mark Pope and Kentucky were going to have a better season than Cal at Arkansas in their respective first years at their new schools. But I did not think Kentucky was going to be this good. I talked a little bit about how I had kind of concerns about how they didn't necessarily have a true point guard, but I think Lamont Butler has really stepped up to the plate and kind of taken on those tasks. I mean, and they just have really great players. I mean, they're a veteran team, mainly all transfers who are they're one of the older teams in the country. They have guys like Kobe Brea who can shoot the lights out. Andrew Carr has been really good for them. Otega Owe, he's been good as well. And Jackson Robinson, in the games Lamont Butler didn't play, Jackson Robinson actually stepped up in terms of his playmaking duties, and he's definitely improved a lot, I think, over the last few games.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, we can look at Lamont Butler's 33-point appearance where he did not miss a single shot, by the way.
Right.
And yeah, it was against Louisville, but that's still a decent team in a pretty solid road win, if you're asking me. This team is now, I believe, the fourth ranked team in the AP poll, and honestly,
Yep.
well deserved. This team looks so much better than anything Cal has produced in the past few years. And it's very surprising to see Pope do this. I didn't expect to see Kentucky be ranked this high this early in the year. We'll have to see how they do in the SEC, but this is turning into be a very, very loaded conference.
For sure. I mean, the SEC is just so stacked. I know
I think there's eight
off,
teams. There's eight ranked
yeah.
teams, which is
I mean, I know
insane.
we just talked about before we started recording that you said you saw an article where they were talking about a potential of 13 SEC teams making the tournament. I mean, I don't think that happens, but if I also don't think it's impossible either. I mean, the SEC is just loaded. You have Tennessee, Auburn, and Kentucky all in the top five. Florida's in there in the top 10. Texas A&M's in there. Oklahoma, Ole Miss. I mean, such a loaded conference, and I know
And
the
good.
SEC commissioner. He placed a really big he's placed a lot more attention in terms of wanting to make the SEC more of a basketball powerhouse. And I mean, they've done it in the last few years, and this year, I mean, perfect example.
True. And it's definitely showing as well. Like the SEC has had very, very, very few non-conference losses this entire time, and very good wins too. A&M had a great win, basically a home game for Purdue, and defeated the team. They have, I mean, beyond that, Oklahoma's had a great stretch. They're also undefeated as well. Florida had a great win against Arizona State in a neutral setting. These are all three teams that, or at least in that one, Old Miss, for example, has fit in well. They're like 15, 16 in the AP poll rankings, if I'm not wrong, somewhere a little bit lower perhaps. But you can look at three teams like these. These don't even scratch the surface of how powerful and how deep the SEC is. You want to talk real deep? Look at how LSU has been performing, for reference.
Yeah,
Vanderbilt. A lot of these teams have a single loss, and sometimes very good losses too, which really makes me wonder how they will perform in the SEC overall, and if we're going to actually see 13 teams. I don't think so because conference play will probably ruin a lot of seasons for a lot of teams, but only so many teams look at ruins. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of games to play.
yeah. I mean, head to toe, the SEC I think looks like the best conference in terms of the um how
It
good
doesn't
of
come
a
close. It really doesn't.
yeah, in terms of the talent and just how good the teams actually are. I think going into the year, most people, including me, thought the Big 12 was probably going to end up shaping out to be the best conference head to toe. But I mean, they're a little bit top heavy, I think, at times. And I mean, a conference like the ACC, or the Big East, they're both are very top heavy as well. I mean, Duke is, in my opinion, the only true national championship contender out of the ACC. The Big East with Marquette, UConn. I think St. John's, and I know understand Creighton lost Pop Isaacs, but if they're able to get Fedor Zugic eligible, that might change some things. But they're quite top heavy as well, and the Big East has suffered some pretty bad losses in this out of conference play um, in this portion of the season, and I think it's going to be a lot harder to find big time resume wins in both the ACC and Big East this year.
No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, like even looking at like for example the ACC, where really the only conference that shows a true leading team, that being Duke, there does not seem to be enough depth where if Duke suffers a couple losses, they're in a bad situation because a
For
loss
sure.
to maybe the fifth best team in the SEC is not a bad loss. It's actually a good loss. The fifth best team in the ACC might be like Miami. It might not
Yeah.
be a team that is even remotely close to being a tournament team, and therefore you can look at what's going on and you'd be disappointed. You'd be
Right.
very disappointed as especially a fan of these conferences.
Right. Yeah, I
But
definitely agree.
that's definitely regardless of the story.
So, just real quick before we kind of move on, is there any teams you think that are too low or too high, or maybe
That's a great
fell or
question.
jumped a bunch of spots that you kind of weren't expecting in terms of the movement?
An interesting one for me, and that's being really, really not talked about, is Michigan State. They're
Yeah,
ranked number 20. Their wins aren't bad. I'm not putting them down. But also, when you consider the teams that they are above and the opportunities they've had to get ranked wins, it hasn't felt as though they fit in the AP poll like that. I don't think they really deserve to be ranked to start off with because if you're even looking at from that, I think the Big Ten is really not defined by Michigan State this year. I think it's really defined by Purdue, Illinois, and Michigan. Michigan State might be the fourth team. They don't really feel like the number two option.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, in terms of who I think maybe might be a little too high, I would maybe say, I don't necessarily know if it's something that's just, because I understand they picked up a win since suffering. They picked up that win against NC State after suffering those two losses to Creighton and forgetting off the top of my head, Missouri, but maybe Kansas. I think they were, I want to say 11 or 10 next week, and they moved up two spots after a win against an NC State team that I don't really know is going to turn too many heads this year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just think like Kansas is really shocking me because on paper going into the season, I felt that they were the deserving number one preseason team. The talent on paper just looked insurmountable compared to the rest of the country. I mean, they absolutely, well, it looked like they loaded up in the transfer portal, picking up guys like AJ Storr, Zeke Mayo, um, Rylan Griffin. David Coit was a sneaky pickup late in the portal process. But I mean, this year their guys just haven't played the way that I think Bill Self and most Kansas fans would have expected them to. Last year, their biggest problem was they didn't have shot making. They didn't have guys that could consistently knock down shots. This year, it looked like you were going to have that, bringing in guys like Zeke Mayo, who has played fairly well, and Rylan Griffin. But I mean, I just don't think they have the shooting that they were advertised to have going into the year. And I think that just clogs everything up because they want to run through Hunter Dickinson. They want to run their offense through Hunter Dickinson, but they're not able to because of the blockage that kind of happens. Because when you have two guys on the floor who really aren't hitting shots, Hunter Dickinson might only take three threes in a game, probably not even. KJ Adams, we already know what he is. He's not a shooter. And DeJuan Harris isn't necessarily the type of guy who's looking to score. So I think that just causes a lot of problems for Kansas. And Bill Self's got to figure it out. I know he's talked about he's tried to light a fire under AJ Storr several times, publicly kind of calling him out in some of his press conferences and talking about some of the effort concerns or how he might have got the wrong read on the type of guy AJ Storr is. But Bill Self's definitely going to have some things to figure out going forward.
Yeah, and they have a huge task ahead of them because there is, right now, at least in my opinion, a really open Big 12. I think, yes,
Yeah,
Iowa State represents the best team, and they are the most likely these teams to get the one seed. But when you really look at it, Kansas just doesn't fit that role the way that they were in previous years. This is not
yeah,
2023's team, don't get me wrong, but this team overall doesn't really have the strength that we thought they were. They have a lot of depth, but you're definitely right. AJ Storr has not shot the ball well. DeJuan Harris is not shooting the ball well. Hunter Dickinson is not being the National Player of the Year candidate we thought we were going to see.
right,
And this team is really lacking behind. Obviously, their two losses are unranked, and they're not the worst losses, to be honest with you. But this is kind of a scenario where they could have won both games, or at least stayed competitive in both games for
for
most of
sure.
the time. And I mean, yeah, their Big 12 schedule isn't horrible either. But when you're really looking at it, like what wins will they really have in the first part? And because they don't play Houston for a while, and
Right.
their game against Iowa State is also in the season two, and Arizona's not a big deal anymore.
Yeah,
So
right.
it kind of really
They definitely fell off a
depends.
cliff.
They have to get the good wins, and they have to avoid bad losses. Like there are a lot of teams in the Big 12 I feel that can provide upset losses. Look at Utah. Look at Colorado. These are teams that can pack a punch in good games. And if Kansas falls to even one of these teams, they're out of anything of a one seed or a two seed.
Yeah, I
So
definitely agree.
they're treading water, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers everything in terms of the poll this week. Let's move on to some of our conference picks. We're just gonna go kind of rapid fire, just name a conference and who we think is gonna win the league, and maybe just any side notes we have. So I guess we'll start off at the top. SEC. Who do you think is taking home SEC championship?
I'm I'm pushing it. I really am. I think Florida. I
Florida.
really think that some. I mean, it really does depend on schedule too. And I haven't seen all the schedules right now, but we really need to talk about this Florida team. Seven in the AP poll. Walter Clayton Jr. is shooting the ball incredibly well. All American talent right there. Elijah Martin is playing alongside him in a really solid position. this team is really providing a lot more. Obviously, their wins haven't been insanely good, but they had a great neutral win against Arizona State. And when you're definitely looking at it, the SEC is going to be cannibalizing a lot of teams. There will be a lot of teams that, like I said before, will have not necessarily unnecessary losses, but will just have too many losses to feel like a good team. Florida might be in that position, but also they only need like one or two good wins against like a Auburn or an Alabama to have that scenario that I've mentioned before. I will say though, probably it's going to be Auburn. I'm just feeling like Florida is in a really good dark horse position right now, and no one's really talking about how good they've been.
Yeah, no, Florida's definitely sneaky. They're definitely a dark horse, not only for the SEC, but as we were talking about off before we start recording, I mean, dark horse for a national championship potentially.
And
But
for yeah,
I, I'm tempted by Kentucky. I really, really am. I think it's Auburn though. I mean, just
yeah,
Janai Broom. He looks like the national player of the year right now, and the way he's playing, and the guys they have around him. I mean, Todd Pettiford, the way he's playing as a freshman, and Baker Mazzara, and I mean, Bruce Pearl's just got a really good thing going in Auburn right now, and I just maybe if Alabama gets hot, starts to get a little bit hotter from shooting the ball, then I don't think you count them out either. I know Mark Sears maybe hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype he had going into the season. He was my pick for National Player of the Year in our preseason overview, but if they get going, I don't want to count Bama out. Mark Pope in Kentucky is very intriguing to me. I think they have a really good all around roster, but right now Auburn just looks like the best team in the country, and I don't see why they're going to slow down anytime soon.
no, I definitely agree with you. It's a hard choice because the SEC is just the hardest conference to really choose a winner at.
Yeah, I
Yes,
know.
Auburn looks great. Yes, Tennessee looks great. Yes, Kentucky looks great. Is that legit though? Conference play has started. There have been
Right.
zero conference games. We have no clue how these teams will perform because everyone had different levels of non-conference strength. Auburn had obviously the strongest one, in my opinion. So they obviously look at the best team right now, but we have no clue, and everyone's schedule's like ever so slightly different. So
Right.
I think all of our choices are valid until the conference starts. That's really how it works, and we're gonna have a fun time watching the SEC. It's gonna be my favorite conference to watch for
Yeah,
quite
definitely.
some time. Let's
All
move
right.
on to the Big East.
Big East. Okay. That's
Yes.
fun. So Big East definitely hasn't been the greatest stretch for Big East teams in this in out of conference play. They've had a few good wins, Creighton beating number one Kansas back when they were ranked number one. Marquette's played really well in out of conference play. I know Providence to pick up a win against BYU that was pretty big, but since then they've kind of struggled. They just losing to St. Bonaventure. But yeah, I mean St. John's has had a few bad losses, so I mean the top of the league has definitely suffered. UConn and Maui didn't help either. So the top of the league's definitely suffered some bad losses, and I think it's going to be a lot harder to pick up resume wins, like I just mentioned earlier, in league play this year. But again, the conference is fairly top heavy. I would think it either goes to Marquette or UConn. Um, right now, I think I edge it out to Marquette just slightly, just the way Cam Jones has played. I mean, he's a legit bucket getter. That's a guy who you really can't stop. It seems like so far. I don't think anyone's necessarily really been able to shut down Cam Jones, maybe contain him. But I mean, yeah, Shaka Smart, been a good coach. Ben Gold, I think we're starting to finally see the hype around Ben, the hype kind of come to fruition that Ben Gold's had around him the past few years, with a lot of people saying, "Oh, next year he's gonna be really good. Next year's gonna be really good," and he think he's finally starting to show some of those glimpses. They have guys like David Joplin, Stevie Mitchell, who are really great pieces to have around Cam Jones in terms of what they bring defensively, as well as Stevie Mitchell's improved on the offensive side of the ball this year. And I mean, I think right now it looks like Marquette. My answer could change in a week or 2 weeks. I might give it to UConn. I think St. John's also has a chance to make a run if they kind of start to shoot the ball a little bit better. I mean, I don't want to doubt Rick Pitino. I think he's, like I mentioned in my Big East preseason overview, um, almost a month or two back at this point, that I think Rick Pitino's came into this year with a vengeance. And I think, the passing of Luke Carnesecca is definitely something that I think has added a lot of motivation to the St. John's program. And I think they have a new energy kind of about them going into Big East play. But I think Marquette wins the Big East as of today.
Honestly, very interesting choice. I definitely get it, and I was gonna say Big E. I was gonna say UConn for the Big East, but everyone knows that UConn's never really had the prominence in the Big East that they always expect. Marquette won it 2 years ago. Very similar style team. Cam Jones fits the role. He fits it better than almost Tyler Kolek, I feel at times,
Yeah,
which surprises me in ways that I didn't think. Because Kolek was, in my opinion, the best player Marquette's had since Dwayne Wade, and I don't know if Cam Jones can replicate anything like that, but it feels a different role. It definitely feels a different role in my opinion. And would I say Marquette as well? Maybe my thing's still up there. I would give it to UConn again. I think it's definitely more reasonable. But there are definitely some outside chances. I like St. John's. Obviously, they're throwing it a little bit better recently. I mean, the Baylor loss is still a little bit in the back of my mind, but this team feels like a ranked team at times. They've
yeah,
definitely shown it in their past few games, but they haven't really had any good like non-conference games since the Baylor loss that I think worth noting because Kansas State has really fallen off as well for reference.
right.
But I don't know. I just I'll just be safe and go with UConn, but there are some outside chances. They really
Yeah,
are.
definitely. I mean, teams like a Creighton. I mean, I understand they lost
Braden,
Pop Isaacs, but if
if
Stephen
Xavier can
Ashworth can shoot
somehow
the
get
ball,
there, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, I think UConn has the highest ceiling out of any team in the Big East. I think their chance for improvement kind of overtakes a lot of other teams, not just in the Big East, but around the country. But as of today, I think I'll go with Marquette. So yeah, I guess let's move along to. Do you want to do the Big 12?
Big Ten. Let's let's
Big
let's
10.
go
Okay, yeah,
geography on that one. Big Ten's kind of, if I want to say it's an easier one, but Purdue's very recent loss to A&M, it doesn't feel as easy as I thought it was going to be. I still would go with Purdue, but Illinois showed very solid work in their very close loss to Tennessee, so I'm pushing me that way. Michigan has shown at times to be very good. Wisconsin has an outside chance. Penn State really surprises me still. Like, this is still a deep Big Ten team or a Big Ten conference, even though it doesn't really show it seed wise. But if you're gonna, put the gun to my head, tell me choose one, I'll go with Purdue. It just feels too hard to choose not.
yeah. No, I mean, I think Braden Smith has played really, really well this year. I think Fletcher Loyer has also improved. In the games, I haven't tuned into many Purdue games this year, but in the times I have, it seems like Fletcher Loyer has improved a lot in being able to go to the basket a little bit more and attack
Yeah,
closeouts.
for me, it's definitely been Trey Coffin-Wren. That's been a
Yeah, TKR
huge
has been
move.
good.
He hasn't obviously filled an ED spot, but when you're looking at it, he has performed at honestly not just a all Big Ten level, but at an All American level. And it's definitely
Yeah,
gonna we're definitely gonna he will definitely need to keep the performance going in conference to keep it going. They already have one loss to Penn State and a win at home against Maryland. So we'll definitely see how that tacks on later on. But there are definitely some big games up ahead for particularly them. They do play Illinois, they do play Michigan. So we'll see how they do against other possibly ranked teams at the time. But otherwise, the conference doesn't really feel as necessarily front running as it did a few weeks ago.
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been fun to see the improvements from the Purdue returners. Now not having Edie, so obviously them needing their returners like a Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, TKR to improve, and that's been fun to see the leaps that those guys have taken.
Yeah.
I don't think Oregon is I understand Oregon is ranked the highest, I believe, of any Big Ten team
Yes.
in the
Yes.
poll
Yes.
this week. I'm not sure if I understand they won the Players Era Festival. They had a big win against Bama, but I don't know if I believe Oregon sustained the level of play that they have.
No.
Right now, I think for me, the three that come to mind are Purdue, Illinois, and Michigan. Um, I just think Illinois, with what they have with Kyan Boswell and Kasparis Jakachonis, the way he's been shooting the ball. I mean, he's a legit FIBA scorer, and he came over and playing for Illinois this year. And I think, he looks really good. And I really like what Dusty May's done with Michigan. It's really cool to see that pick and roll. They kind of run with their two, with the 4 and the 5 with Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. That's really cool to see, and borderline unguardable at times. But I kind of it's tough. I think Michigan doesn't necessarily. I don't think Michigan wins the Big Ten this year. For me, it's between Purdue and Illinois, and I think I give it to Purdue just because of the experience of their backcourt and their guys that they have. They've played on the biggest stage, and I think I trust them to sustain their level of play through conference play than I do Illinois.
What do you think about UCLA?
UCLA,
Yeah.
UCLA is honestly, I mean, this could potentially be the best team that they've had since their Final Four run, unless any other team is any other of their teams are kind of falling out of my memory. But I
No.
mean, yeah, they've looked good this year.
Yeah, they have the best defense in the country, which I think is
Yeah,
being
definitely
overlooked.
shocking.
Yes, and their
Um,
win against Arizona was definitely solid, even though Arizona's not really a tournament team anymore,
right.
but it's still a
Yeah,
really good win, in my
yeah.
opinion.
I mean, it's definitely with the teams out west in the last few years, you really haven't seen much of a legit threat out there in terms of a true national championship contender outside of maybe Gonzaga, who you know
Hasn't
hasn't
really shown
won.
it either.
But yeah, I mean, teams out west, I kind of leave with an asterisk just because I don't. I believe since 2000, the furthest west a team has won a national championship was Baylor in 2021. So I mean, yeah, I mean they definitely can win the Big Ten, but I don't see them as a national championship contender in my eye.
No, no, neither do I. I think Oregon is definitely in a good position. UCLA's tournament team, I think there's some opportunities there, but of the newcomers in the Big Ten, it
I
doesn't
just
feel
trust
like
Purdue
there's
the most.
yeah.
I
I trust them
trust
the most as
I
well,
trust
but
Matt Painter. I trust their backcourt. I trust TKR. And yeah, I mean that's kind of just where look at how I look at it.
let's move on to our last conference of talk, that being the Big 12. This is another really good one as well. Personally, for me, I want to go with Iowa State off the bat. They've really shown it. Gilbert's shown it. Thomas Lipsey's obviously shown it so well. I think Hilton Magic, I don't think they lose a game there at home all season. To be real, through it's just such a strong home environment as of recent. But Houston has shown improvement. Kansas is still a team worth talking about. There are a lot of open spaces in the middle between places like schools like Arizona State, like Colorado. Do we see more activity from teams in the further western parts, or even West Virginia, for example, who has definitely had their share of good wins as of recent?
Right. Um yeah, I mean, the Big 12, I think I give it to Iowa State right now. No, there is a world where I think Bill Self gets Kansas back on track and then they kind of live up to the hype they had coming into the season. But that was a concern I talked about them. Like, yeah, they have a lot of good players on paper, but can they play together? That's a lot of egos. Um, Not throw names out there, but Hunter Dickinson, AJ Storr, those are guys who want the ball. And not, there's only one basketball on the court. DeJuan Harris was a really good point guard, but he's kind of been put in a position this year where he can't really just be a distributor. They've kind of looked at him to score a little bit more, and that's not really his game. Um, I think there's also a world where Scott Drew. I understand Baylor's kind of stuff. They've had a little bit of trouble with injuries in that UConn game. They didn't have VJ Edgecombe. Jeremy Roach went down in the second half. But I think there's a world where they kind of get things together a little bit. But I just think Iowa State looks like the most
Yeah,
legitimate
they feel like a
contender out of the Big
possible one
12, and
seed as well.
yeah, I could definitely see Iowa State getting a one seed for sure. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. Houston, I talked about it. I'm not sure if I'm a believer necessarily on LJ Cryer when all the pressure's on him. I think the Mark Sears graduation hurt the program a lot. Next year they're going to be loaded with that freshman class they have coming in, but this year, I just don't necessarily know if they have. I don't know if I trust LJ Cryer with all those responsibilities that are on him now. He's a really talented scorer, and I think he's more better when he's kind of doesn't have that pressure on him. He's able to play off the ball and play the two. But I don't know if
No,
I'm
I,
a
I
necessarily
definitely agree
believer in
with
him.
you. I mean, I had Houston in my Final Four when we first had our preseason reviews, and I had them winning the Big 12. I just can't say that anymore. They feel like a five seed at times. They really haven't shot the ball well, and their wins, while yes, have been good as of recent, The losses in the player era festival have really put me off them as of recent,
Yeah,
and I just don't really know what to say because you're very much right. You're very much right. Uzan, Crier, they haven't put together the way that I thought they were going to, and it's a little concerning.
right. So I guess just quick ACC. I mean Duke. I think we both agree on that. Um, there's not much of a conversation. I don't think there's a legitimate national championship contender in that conference outside of Duke. UNC, I talked about. I'm sure we both talked about it. Anyone who covers college basketball was talking about. They didn't address their need in the portal or with their recruiting very well, and needing to get a big to try to help fill the void that was left by the Armando Bacot graduation. And I mean, Cade Tyson played well against LaSalle, but I think that was kind of a miss on their end. I don't think he's played the way that the program and maybe some of their fans expected him to play, being one of the best shooters in the country last year at Belmont. And it's just a lot. You can't expect RJ Davis to have to go out and do everything. I understand Seth Trimble and Ellie Cadeau have both improved from last year to this year, but I just don't think they have enough in the front court to give Duke a real challenge to win the ACC.
No, I definitely agree with you. It just doesn't really feel like they were a team anymore. I mean, if they get a win against Florida tonight, maybe, but they're not even ranked. They don't even feel like they're deserving to be ranked for
Yeah,
quite some time. And when you look outside of the Carolina schools, there's really nothing there. I mean, Clemson maybe, but
yeah, Clemson maybe that. I mean, that's the only other
Pitt
one that really
perhaps.
maybe.
But it
Yeah,
just
but
the conference feels so weak as of recent. There might be only four
definitely
teams that make it.
right. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much going to cover our conference picks and over who we think is going to win each conference. So kind of staying with Duke a little bit here. We're going to talk about the freshman of the year race. Who's really caught our attention? I know we talked about some of the best freshmen and transfers in the country a few weeks back, but definitely I think that race is heating up, particularly between Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper.
Yeah.
So I know you had a little bit to say about this off camera, but so I'll let you start. Todd, what's your take right now?
I'm falling for Dylan Harper on this one. He's really shown his opportunities. Obviously, not just the buzzer beater in the Seton Hall game, but just his overall performance in that game was incredibly clutch and important. Rutgers has a strong schedule going forward. They will not contend for the Big Ten title the way that Duke will contend for the ACC title, but I still think that this is that he himself is a player that fills the role of main leading point guard on a team, on an NBA caliber team as well in the future. Do I think he will take the number one spot away from Cooper? Probably not, but he's really pushing the boundaries because Cooper Flag, yes, has had some great games, but he hasn't led the team in the way that Dylan Harper has. Dylan Harper leads. I mean, I get it that Cooper Flag has a stronger and more deep team. But also at the same time, Dylan Harper has Ace Bailey sitting around the corner. Like you would think that there'd be more of a duo there, which I'm still waiting on. I still think there's a possibility for that. But Dylan Harper has shown himself to be the leading guy every single night. And I think that's the biggest thing I've seen. And that's why I would put him, as of right now, above Cooper Flag. I think it's only temporary, though. I think Cooper Flag will find himself in the ACC play.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the talk around Cooper Flag is kind of quieted in the last few weeks, and I think Dylan Harper's really kind of taken over this conversation a little bit. In my opinion, he might be the best point guard prospect out of college since Markel Fultz at Washington. In my personal belief, I mean, just I didn't realize Harper was 6'5". I mean, he's a legit NBA prospect, someone who I think, I mean, he's going to come in and contribute right away in the NBA. He's a legit player. I mean, he's a great distributor. Really good off the dribble too, and creating his own shot and looking to attack. Ace Bailey's played really well too, but I think he's taken a little bit of a backseat to Dylan Harper. I know that Dylan Harper's probably the benefit of being the guy who has the ball in his hands, being the point guard the most. But yeah, I mean the Cooper Flag, I think will get the benefit of the doubt just due to the media attention and all the hype surrounding him and being, him potentially being the number one pick in the NBA draft. I think he probably still will end up being it. Um, I don't want to come off as a homer here with UConn, but I think Liam McNeely has a chance to enter himself into that conversation. I think his performance against Gonzaga was, he's had good games before, but I think that was really, just it was a perfect storm being at MSG, them kind of needing a big resume win in a going into conference play in the Big East that's not doesn't isn't going to have a lot of big resume wins. That was a game they needed him where their go-to guy. I mean, I don't necessarily know if UConn programs will ever have a go-to guy. It could end up being Lee McNeely, but Alex Caravan's probably the best player on that team and the leader. But he shot the ball pretty bad in that game, and Lee McNeely was really um, kind of their only source of offense for the most part at times. But he did a really good job attacking the basket, and I think he hasn't even shot the ball very well yet from three. And I think once he does, he has a chance to really light it up in Big East play and maybe enter that conversation. I still think it's primarily between Dylan Harper and Cooper Flagg. I think I'm siding with you right now. I'd give it to Dylan Harper, but Cooper Flagg will probably end up winning it.
Yeah, it's definitely a pusher. I mean, obviously Lee McNeely represents a good outsider. There's a lot of good outsiders. This has been a very nice
Yeah, definitely.
class.
I mean, Trey Johnson at Texas is very talented
Yes,
too. I
I
understand he's on a bad Texas team, but at times he's their only source of anything, playmaking and scoring, and he's done it.
no, you're
Um,
right. He's hard to ignore. I think Jeremiah Fears is hard to ignore at
yeah,
OU. I think
Tahad Pettiford at Auburn.
Jaden Quaidens and ASU's name I
Yeah,
will not forget. He has a whole opportunity in the Big 12 and sticking the Big 12. Igor Denham at
yeah, yeah. He's
BYU. I
been
mean,
lighting it up. He's been
I
really
know
good.
they're like, I think definitely look out for these younger guys in particularly the Big 12, but also, you know, both Cooper and honestly both Duke and Rutgers. They're both filled with great freshman talent.
Yeah,
And
Kneppel could even give
Duncan Apple
Flag a
has
little
his
bit of a run
opportunities.
before that.
Kaman is doing well. Obviously, Ace Bailey still needs time to start up. He's only played like a few games so far, but these freshmen are playing, and I think it's
Definitely.
going to be very fun to watch at times.
Super loaded freshman class.
Yes, I'm very happy to see it.
All right, so now I think we'll talk a little bit about our revised Final Four picks, or unless you want to do Mountain West, or not Mountain West,
I think
mid
it's
major
worth doing a
talk,
little mid major watch. I
mid
think
major, yeah,
there's two teams I think we really missed out on talking on that everyone's been talking about, and it's Dayton and Memphis.
yeah,
We've had really
definitely.
explosive seasons so far. I think Dayton's been the bigger winner.
Hmm.
Memphis obviously has that unfortunate loss at home against Arkansas State, which honestly, it is still a very good Arkansas State team. But when you definitely look at it overall in the scheduling, it's not the loss you want to have. Let's be real. But
Yeah,
Dayton,
yeah,
all their losses, other than maybe the UNC loss at Maui, have been good losses. This is a
right.
team that's ranked in the top 20, and we're talking about it right now. Everyone's been considering it. If they go undefeated in the A10, do they grab a number one seed? Are they the next coming of the 2020 Obi Toppin level Dayton team that never
Yeah,
got that one seed that we were all hoping to get?
I mean, they very much could be. I mean, they have a really good team. They lit up. It wasn't fun. I didn't watch the game because it was super late, but I mean, they lit up UConn. Wasn't even close in that game.
Yeah, and they did the
They
same
picked up
thing.
that big win against Marquette, and they got some guys. I mean, it was I think losing some of the guys they lost from last year, like a Kobe Bray, definitely hurt. But they retooled and they reloaded and
And
they
their team is Power Five level. Enoch
yeah,
Chiefs,
definitely.
Zed Key, like these are players that I think played previously in Power Five conferences or at
Yeah, I
least
mean,
on
Posh
Power Five.
Alexander, I believe, was at Butler last year. I
Yes,
think.
yes, Posh Alexander was, and he played pretty well there too. And he's coming off the bench as a possible six man of the year.
Right.
Like, put it in the books. And they're not playing in a light A10. We're talking about an A10 filled with the likes of VCU, one loss URI, possible sleeper teams in St. Bonaventure, George Mason. Like this could be an A10 that produces more than one uh, team like it did last year, and
Yeah,
Dayton
definitely.
could just grab an at large like they did last time too, and it could be even higher than it was last year. Like this
I
feels
mean,
surprisingly good for a team that really I didn't see competing at this level.
yeah, I mean, there's been talks for the last years, especially this year with how well they've played about Dayton joining the Big East, and I can definitely get
I've heard
behind
that
that.
story too. I think they should. I think
Yeah,
they
I
absolutely
agree.
should.
I mean, DePaul's actually played better, but I mean, wouldn't be opposed to kicking DePaul out for Dayton in the Big East. But
Yeah, go
um,
Heat ball.
yeah, I might have to knock on wood there. It sounds like DePaul's actually. I mean, they took Providence to OT, so who knows? And they might pick up a win or two this year in Big East
Yeah, we'll
play.
find out about that one. They already have 8 on the season, which is double what they had
Yeah,
last year.
definitely.
Kind of. surprising to ask for. But anyway, I think obviously in the other talk in the room is Memphis, and their performance in non-conference play has been insane. They're winning at on the road against a pretty solid Clemson team is definitely turning heads. Obviously, they're winning against UConn, so looking better and better by the day. And obviously, they have their opportunities to mess up. We know how they are, but the American is completely like
Right,
these are
for sure.
easy quad two, quad three wins. Like
Yeah,
take maybe one loss, and you're a guaranteed top five seeded team in the tournament. Like we're talking about perhaps finally at least Penny Hardaway's opportunity to break out. He's been looking for it for the longest time now, and this is finally the opportunity. He just can't do what he did last year and lose like all those games at the end of the year because
for sure.
that really screwed him over.
Yeah, I mean, Penny might legitimately finally have found the formula. He has really good guards with good size with
Yeah,
PJ
PJ
Haggerty,
Haggerty.
Tyrese Hunter. I mean, Tyrese Hunter can shoot the lights out. And they have some talent down low. I talked about it. I transferred acquisition that kind of fell on the radar was Dane Danger going from Illinois to Memphis. That was a big pickup for them. And yeah, I mean, they definitely, this is an American conference I don't think is going to be very competitive this year. And who knows, they could have a chance to run through with maybe only a loss or two.
Yeah. And then moving out west, I think there's definitely talk about what's going on in the Mountain West as long as the WCC. Mountain West has been a little bit interesting. I think it's really San Diego State's place to win it, but
Yeah,
look out for Boise State. They've had some really good wins too. That Clemson win is definitely a reminder for me. You also probably need to take a look at New Mexico at times. They had their bad loss against State earlier this month, but I think that can be removed after a while, given their record later on this season. This is not the Mountain West of last year, but it's still a Mountain West that feels competitive.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, San Diego
Same
State, probably my pick.
WCC is
But
starting to light up a little bit. I mean, now that Gonzaga is feeling a little bit weaker. We were talking earlier this season how Gonzaga can go undefeated. I don't know if they do that anymore. St. Mary's is shown to be a tournament team. San Francisco is still in the mix. Like this feels a little bit more like last year than we thought we were going to have, and I think it's definitely worth a little look at, but not the biggest peak. I think Gonzaga still
yeah,
has that confidence.
I mean, Gonzaga always has to watch out for St. Mary's as any normal year. That's that rivalry's great, and it's unfortunate that rivalry is going to be gone once Gonzaga joins the Pac-12. But yeah, I think right now, if you're Mark Few and Gonzaga, you kind of look at I don't want to say the most of the conference is a pushover, but realistically, it probably is. I think Gonzaga's talent's enough to overwhelm most teams in the WCC, even if a lot of their guys play their B minus C games. But uh, but I think the way Mark Few has to approach this is he needs to use these games as a way to roll out different lineups on the court and really try to figure out and hone in on some of the flaws and concerns that have kind of arisen in this out of conference play. I mean, you need Graham Ike to play consistent. And I think this is a great opportunity to try to get him to kind of settle down and be able to find kind of like just a steady path of production. And then, you need guys to show up consistently in terms of shooting the ball. Dusty Stromer started the year pretty hot from three. He's kind of slowed down a little bit. His defense on Alex Caravan the other night was definitely encouraging to see if you're a Zags fan. Um, but I think you look for him to shoot the ball a little bit better. You need to figure out your forward situation a little bit more with Huff, kind of not showing up against UConn and Greg. I think you just look for a little bit more from those
Yeah,
guys. But yeah, you can't rely on Ryan Nemhard to go out and solely win you games. I know Caliph Battle has been good too. He lit it up against UConn, but yeah, I think that's Gonzaga's approach. But
true, true, and it definitely shows because once again, this is a Gonzaga team that still can be a number one seed,
for sure,
but
yeah,
they really need to tear it up in their conference, and they need to make sure that whatever they're doing, it's done to the fullest level because they've already had their hardest games. All of their hardest games are
yeah,
behind them right now. So now to make sure they can win their easy games before things get really hard and they have to deal with, the tournament teams that are obviously not on the level of, say, a Portland, for reference. And then beyond that, the lower level mid-major style that we're definitely taking a look at. I think GCU is performing great in the WAC. They've had two good Power Five losses. to I think Georgia and the other team. Might be Oklahoma State. They have a great Power Five win over Stanford though on the road at Stanford. So definitely worth its while. Um, do you think Ty Grant Foster has it all together like he did last year?
I mean, I think so. I think he's one of the most talented scorers in the country and has a. I mean, he is a legit NBA prospect type of player.
Easily.
Um, and I think they have a little bit more depth around him than they did last year. So I think that's going to help for sure. They won't have to be solely reliant on him. It also depends on the draw they get in the tournament. Assuming they do make it, I think they will.
Yeah, I
Last year they
think
got
they
a
should go undefeated too in conference.
yeah. I mean, yeah. But last year they got a pretty good draw with playing who was it they played first round?
Wisconsin.
Was it Wisconsin? Yeah. I mean that Wisconsin team was
Wait, that was not
streaky.
that was JMU. My bad.
Oh,
They
Jay,
had
yeah, you're right.
wow.
I know they played St. Mary's in round two, was
That's
it?
what
Or
it
was
was.
it
No,
round one?
they played St.
Round one.
Mary's. Yes.
Yeah. That was a good draw. That was a matchup nightmare for St. Mary's. They had smaller guards and GCU got out and played really physical against
And
them
their
and
three
made
point
them comfortable.
shooting
And
is definitely the bigger thing as well. I mean, I
yeah,
remember that in their game against Alabama afterwards. So there's definitely talk about how they will play at the tournament level, but we've already seen they can do that, and we've seen it right now already
right,
in conference or non-conference play. And you really, really, really look at it. This is a team you cannot ignore March. Like, put
for
it in your
sure.
bracket
Yeah,
as a team to upset at least one Power Five team because GCU is on that level. I think,
definitely.
I think another team that is also worth talking about on that similar level is Drake. They are currently
Yeah, for
undefeated
sure.
in the Missouri Conference or Missouri Valley Conference, MVC. It is kind of at the same level as last year. If you remember last year, Indiana State and Drake were competing. Indiana State was like really seen as the higher level talent. They ended up just missing it. Drake ended up having a subpar performance against Washington State. They were not able to overcome any issue or any challenges they had. But looking at it this year, the team feels to somehow be in a better position, and the depth is there for them to get good wins. Belmont has a pretty solid resume, so a couple wins against them will be nice. Do you see anything else in the conference or anything about Drake in particular?
Um, Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, I think. Yeah, I think Drake's played really well. It's really cool to see all those guys transfer up from the D2 level and play really
That's
well.
a because I forgot where their coach is from, like D2
Yeah,
like Western
he
Georgia.
came out from a D2 school. I forget which one.
Same, but
But he brought a lot of his players over, and I mean they've competed. They've competed at the D1 level, and that's a really cool story to see.
yeah, and
And I definitely think it's something we're going to potentially see going forward too
sure. And then
across the country.
one more like little mid major I'm looking at is UC Riverside.
Yeah,
They've had some work cut out for them. They have just I think one loss to Oregon State this season. They're definitely feeling to be in a better spot. I've seen how they've played a little bit. It's a lot of returning talent. Like most of this team was the same team from last year. The Big West is pretty open as it always is, so we'll have to see how that transforms. But if they go undefeated, there's definitely a possibility for them to get an at large bid or even like a top 10 seed. This feels like a solid mid major team that is hard to ignore once again.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think that pretty much covers our mid-major watch. Unless there's anything else you were looking to
Nah,
add. Nah. Okay. So yeah. So I think we're gonna get into some of our revised Final Four picks. Going into, I mean, as it stands right now, I believe mine going in our preseason overview, it's a little tough to remember. I want to say I had Kansas. I think I know I had Alabama. I want to say I threw Gonzaga in there as well, and then I think I might have also thrown Baylor in, but that's definitely going to change in my picks today. But I'll turn it to you first if you want to throw yours out.
yeah, no, and for reference for me, I had something somewhat similar. I had Alabama, Gonzaga, Houston, and Florida in my final four. I actually would like to keep Florida in there. They're performing exactly the way I thought they am, so big pat on the back for me. But the other three teams haven't shown it at all, and that's kind of annoying. I'll replace Alabama with Auburn. To be honest, I think that's like a pretty one-for-one change from where I'm seeing it right now. I think put me with Duke. I think Duke has really shown their opportunities. And then I might be really chalky with this, but give me Kentucky. They're really really breaking it for me on where you can put a lower level, just starting out in the SEC coaching level type for Mark Pope and for this entire team in general. But they've shown it. They've proven to me. They've proven basically all the haters wrong. I cannot despise this team in any fashion. Not that I dislike Kentucky at all, but I just see them being the one for it. And yes, my Final Four has three SEC teams, but like that just feels like the most realistic thing right now. If you told me tomorrow or today, I should say, that all four Final Four teams will be from the SEC, I just wouldn't be surprised. I just this feels like the best opportunity for the SEC to win a national title.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I think if the SEC is going to win a title, I mean, this year is one of their best chances to in a while. Um, I think for my Final Four, I'm throwing Auburn in there. Um, I think I also throw Kentucky in there. I'm a little concerned throwing this pick out, but I mean, I don't know. I think Mark, like I said, I was a believer in Kentucky. I wasn't this much of a believer in Kentucky. I did not think they were going to be a top five team in the country. But I mean, Mark Pope has made me a believer, and I really love his system. I think um, I even think like they haven't necessarily played their best game yet, even yet. And I think they're only going to continue to play better. Again, the SEC is going to be really tough, and there's even a possibility where we might not see an SEC team become a one seed just because of how competitive it is going to be, and there might be a lot of losses to throw around among these teams.
I
But in
have to
terms of
like
who makes a
disagree with
Final
that one a little
Four,
bit.
yeah. But in terms of who I think makes the Final Four, I mean, I'm throwing Auburn, Kentucky in there. It pains me to do this, but I'm throwing Duke in there too. I mean, I just think Flag and Kneppel, they came as advertised. I didn't think they were going to be this good this early on, and I think they kind of need someone else to emerge off the bench a little bit. I think Sion James has done it a little bit more as of late. But I mean, they have good pieces, Kaman Malach, Caleb Foster, uh, Tyree, what's the kid's name? Evans,
Yes, like
Isaiah,
yes,
yeah, Isaiah Evans, I think.
Isaiah Evans, yeah.
He's shot the ball really well. Tyrese Proctor's played a lot better this year. They have good veterans off the bench with Malik
Sion
Brown,
James definitely
Sion
really good.
James,
Mason Gillis, like
Mason Gillis,
I can
yeah.
go on and on this Duke team. I have them in my Final Four too. They're a team that could surprise heads. I mean, they have the experience. I think. I mean, it's really up to you
Yeah.
what you want.
And
But
I mean, I think they even have a chance to make a run at a number one overall seed with an ACC that's not strong at all this year. Who knows? I mean, they can make it out with only one or two losses in conference play. And then for my last pick, I think I got to throw my Huskies in there. I'm throwing UConn in. I just think, you know, even after Maui, I was still a believer that they can make a Final Four where even Husky fans, I've talked about it on the Saturdays and Stores podcast. I think UConn fans are some of the worst sports fans in the country, in my opinion. Just New England sports fans in general are terrible. But yeah, a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon. I'm like, I mean, like, dude, this team's so young, it's so early. I think you got to trust your coaching staff, which in my opinion is the best in the country. And I mean, I think they haven't played their best game yet either. Defensively, they're still not great. They've improved, but they're not great yet. They're still undisciplined fouling wise. Um, and they're really relying on that sophomore class of Solo Ball, Jaden Ross, and Jalen Stewart. Jalen Stewart's kind of showed up as of late. Jaden Ross isn't there necessarily just yet. Solo Ball's been really good shooting the ball. I think he's shooting close to 46% from three on the year as a starter this season. And yeah, Alex Caravan didn't play well against Gonzaga. Liam McNeely showed up, and again, he hasn't shot the ball very well either. I think this team has such a high ceiling. Terrace Reed has played really well. Samson Johnson's gotten a lot better. Aiden Mahaney hasn't even gotten going yet. I don't know if he will. He might be buried in the rotation as of late with, his play hasn't been very good. But say he does become a contributor, I think UConn has a very high ceiling. Um, Definitely, I think the highest ceiling out of any team in the Big East. And of the contending teams, I mean, I think, of course, it's so hard to make it back to a Final Four, but I trust Dan Hurley. I think he's going to figure it out, and I think UConn's going to continue to improve through Big East play. Hopefully, saying this as a fan, but yeah, I think I'm throwing UConn as my last pick in for the Final Four.
And of your four teams, who do you see winning them all? Who's your
Um,
who's hosting it?
I think I give it to Auburn. Um,
I just have to accept Auburn.
yeah,
Listen, it's all temporary. We said the same thing about Alabama a month ago, 2 months ago now, and I'll be honest. I definitely like go on my word a little bit. Like 2 weeks ago, I thought, generally speaking, all these one seeds didn't feel legit. Now I'm feeling like the opposite is in that scenario. But just give me Auburn. They feel like the front runner for no bad reason at all. And I just until conference play starts, you can't convince me that it's not Auburn. You just
I
can't.
think it definitely depends on draw, like
And
who these
draw
teams end up
definitely
playing in the Final Four.
matters.
If Auburn were to have to play UConn in a national semifinal, I'm not saying that there's a player on UConn. I don't think Terrace Reed and Samson Johnson do a very good job of defending as a player. Just I don't think they're the caliber player to defend Janai Broom. I think it comes down more to what Hurley and Kimani Young and Luke Murray scheme up to try to stop him, because I trust their scheming more than I trust the actual players on the UConn team. Um, but I mean, if they play Kentucky or Duke in the national semifinal, I think they easily make it to the national championship game. And then
I would
I
pause on that one. I'm being honest with you. If there's a rematch between Auburn and Duke, do not hold the Blue Devils against themselves. They had, I think, yes, obviously winning at
I
Cameron.
think they only won because they were at Cameron Indoor, and
I know,
honestly,
that's what
in my
everyone's thinking.
opinion,
But
but
I also feel as though even with the setting, I don't think it defines the win itself. To be honest,
I
and
still
I
don't
mean,
trust Shire in the big game. I don't.
I get that.
Give me Pearl over
And
Shire any day.
hmm, I don't think it really. I don't think it's really on the coach. I think it's more or less on just the players themselves. And if Cooper Flag can get over those late game closeouts, which I think he's starting to get around
Well, I
to.
mean, those are freshman mistakes, but I think that falls on Shire. Why are you having Flag bring the ball up when they know he's probably going to take the last shot? Have Caleb Foster bring it up, or run a play for Kneppel who can shoot it really well. I mean, that's a guy who they haven't looked to late in game, and I think they need to. I mean, that's a guy who, I mean, he looks pretty legit. I don't understand them always having Flag bring the ball up when the game's close. So I think they're kind of setting up for failure in that situation a lot. But I'm sure Shire knows it. I'm sure Flag knows it. That they'll probably change it up. But again, I'm just not a believer in Shire in the big game.
Hmm, I don't know. I'm starting to fall into line with this Duke team. They feel it's shades of 2019. I don't think it'll ever be anything like those years with Coach K, but this is Shire's best team. And for him to
Yeah, definitely.
not put all the effort into his best player, I think would be almost a rash decision. Do I think that in a rematch between Auburn and Duke, Duke would just pummel the other team and Auburn wouldn't really be in the scenario? I think no. I think Auburn might be the favorite in that scenario depending on how things go. But if I'm being honest with you, it's really really hard to count Duke out. Regardless of the fact
Yeah,
though, give me Auburn. I really don't care about the matchup at the moment because we're still so far out. Like we haven't mentioned
right.
before, zero conference games have started for the SEC and won't start for another week. Auburn still needs to play a tough ranked Purdue team to finish off their conference schedule. So we have to see how that turns out. But overall, it's Auburn versus the field. That's what I'm
Yeah,
feeling.
I agree. Yeah, this
Plus,
Auburn team is really
it's the
good.
SEC versus the field. That's what I'm
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah, it is. It's the SEC's world this year, and the rest of these conferences are just living in it, trying to hopefully make a little noise. But I mean, yeah, the country's dominated by the SEC this year
Yeah.
for
And pat
sure.
on the back for them. They finally got it to go. It's been a long, long time in the coming, or in the making, I should say. And here we are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd even say a lot of these SEC schools, you almost look at them more as a basketball school now than football. I mean, Auburn, especially.
Auburn's more of a basketball school now. I mean,
Yeah,
we said it in 2019 how they were like that, but that was more like a joke, to be real with you. This
right.
feels legit.
Yeah,
Florida feels more like a basketball school. South
yeah.
Carolina at times can feel like that. I think it's
I
really
mean,
more on the
Ever since Saban's
the
hung
same
it up. I
time
mean,
exactly.
Alabama, but but yeah, I mean, it's definitely SEC is going to be so fun to watch in
I'm
conference
very
play.
excited. I
Yeah, me
think
too.
every person who follows college basketball, whether a student or just a general fan like ourselves, should be tuning on the TV every other day to watch an SEC game
Yeah,
because
I mean,
that's where the
the,
world's going nowadays.
it's college basketball is in such a great place right now. I mean, we've talked about the parity across the sport. I know some conferences are a little top heavy this year, but this year, I don't even though we do think Auburn does kind of look like the best team in the country, I still don't think they've necessarily separated themselves head over heels the way maybe like a Purdue or UConn has in
Previous,
last year.
exactly.
Or
It's
I mean, it's so wide open this year. I mean, it you could make an argument for several unranked teams to make a Final Four right now. I know mine was mainly pulling from the top 15, but you could pull teams from that lower tier of the top 25 and even outside the top 25 that definitely have the potential to make a Final Four.
no,
And
exactly. This feels a
yeah,
lot like a 2023 and not a 2024.
yeah, definitely. I agree for sure. This definitely does give me 2023 vibes. And I mean, one of the best starts in college basketball in recent memory this year, I think, for sure.
But yeah, that'll probably do it for us. We'll
Yeah.
be keeping going. Obviously, when we get into conference play, we'll have a lot of talks about that. And yeah, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, just as always, if you like this podcast, if you like the content or anything else you see on this channel, review, subscribe, comment down below too. I mean, we like seeing what you guys have to
And
say, and
respond
we'll
if you
try to
want.
respond. Yeah, we'll try to respond as much as we can. We'll love to hear some of your takes. But yeah, I mean, tell your friends about it. Just engage with content any way you can. Helps getting this out to more people. So yeah, it's gonna cover everything for me and Josh today. Thank you all for watching, and yeah, been trying to put out more videos. And until next video, we'll see you all next time.